G'day and welcome back to the Voice of a Veteran podcast. This is the episode number 2 with Dan Keighran. And this time we sit down and go through the release of his recent book, Courage Under Fire, which really talks about his life story from before defence and afterwards, and is a great tale of one veteran's journey, that of a Victoria Cross winner himself. In this, we really dive into some key details, and particularly there's a lot of great stories in this episode that really jumped out to me as they had pathways and threads through my own military career, and it was really fun and enjoyable sitting down with Dan and discussing some of those similarities, those key differences, and some of those lives in complete parallel. So tune in and enjoy this episode. All right, g'day and welcome back to the Voice of a Veteran. I'm here again with Dashing Dan from Darapat. Dan, mate, I'm here with your book, Courage Under Fire. Now, for those watching, listening, I don't read, and I read your book in about 3 days. And, mate, it was absolutely fantastic as far as just being real and authentic, telling what is a great Australian story. I was also extremely impressed by the amount of people you got to give you comments.
Called in a few favours, mate, to get the comments, yeah.
And then even reading your book and then going back and looking at some of these comments, I'm like, oh, what did they think when they read this book?
Because it is bloody honest, right?
It is. And how's the feedback been from those who might potentially look at this as not being very ironed and starched?
Look, no one said anything to me yet, actually.
Oh, wow.
No, I'm waiting. I'm happy for take negative comments. Doesn't worry me in the slightest.
Sorry, mate. I got on the media and threw knives at them all, and no one's ever contacted me yet. So it's good. Ignorance is bliss. But, mate, what I want to do is, look, I literally cannot encourage enough people to pick this up and have a read of it, because you touch on everything from the reason why you joined service, and there's a lot in there in your personal life, and I don't mean to skip over that because that is so personal, but I want to sort of go to a lot of the relatable variables that are in here, particularly as far as like your life in service, and particularly for as we are going through this stuff in the wider Australian public at the moment. The opportunity now is to help educate the Australian public to what a life in service was, and particularly for that sort of Afghan 2001 on generation, of which you are right bang mint in the middle and one of our most outstanding exceptional soldiers. So with your permission, I would like to go through a few pages that I have crimped and highlighted.
I was about to say, yeah, you have dog-eared a few pages and got some highlighter on there, mate.
I literally felt like I was butchering this and disrespectful to it, but it was fantastic. You know, I literally had my popcorn out reading as I did this. But so I love some parts in here where you talk about one of the first times when you were in combat in Iraq, and you had the crack thump going over your head, and you started getting the smile crossing from ear to ear on your face, and it's something so foreign in a conversation that so many of my civvy mates and family, and even as you can imagine, trying to explain these things to people, like, what do you mean? Like, you enjoyed being in contact, being in conflict, and it's being like tested for the first, finally putting your skills to the test. How was it for you?
Look, I think it is absolutely the ultimate challenge, right? So someone has just tried to kill you. How are you going to react? What else is out there that is that challenging? Which it's like a chess game essentially.
I love it. Right? You said problem solving. Yeah. What's the ultimate problem to solve? Someone's trying to kill me.
Yeah,
how
absolutely.
Good. That's fantastic.
They're actively trying to kill you.
Yeah.
What am I going to do about it?
And you're finally getting put. I refer to it as imagine being trained up for a game of rugby and never getting to play, and then you finally get to play.
Yeah, absolutely. It's the first time to go, here we go. Here's 6 years under my belt of everything. Instructors have told me in training and doing all these things.
Yeah.
What am I going to do about it now that someone's actually trying to kill me?
I love that. I love that. And you were quite happy with your performance. You were quite happy with that feeling. But what did that feel like in combat, in contact? You've gone through it many times now. Were there any times that you properly feared for your own life?
Mate, that's a strange one. I wouldn't say, feared for your life. I mean, there's always concerns, I think, certainly in some of the operational environments we've been in Iraq and Afghanistan, where and the IED threat, the unknown. I'm sweet with someone shooting at me because, I know roughly where it's coming from. There's something I can do about it. There's not much I can do about stepping on an IED. It's going to blow my legs off, right? Yeah. So I don't have control. I think it comes a little bit down to that control aspect, and there's some planning parts. Well, you can take different courses of route or whatever to avoid IEDs, and there's some, tactics and some part of that, but it's always there. It's always constant. But then someone shoots at you. It's a new sort of thing that that there's an engagement period. That this is the time to do something now. It's in your face and there's nothing you can do. You can't hide from it. You have to deal with it and you have to act.
Absolutely.
And your performance will be, well, am I going to lie? Am I going to be alive or dead at the end of this?
It's a pretty tangible, immediate feedback loop, isn't it? They're shooting at me, I'm shooting at them. Someone's going to come out of this.
Yeah, I stuffed up, I got shot in the face. It's one of those, absolutely. I think.
There's no refresh button.
No,
refresh button.
No, not at all.
That's so interesting you talk about that IED threat, mate. I'm the same, and I try and relate that to civilians. I lost Scott Smith 2012 in Helmand, to an IED, and particularly as a commander, but as anyone over there, I sort of say to people, I can punch a bad guy in the face, I can shoot a bad guy, but an IED isn't something that I can, I can sort of justify. It's this threat that is unknown, and it's constantly out there, and it really is one of those things that can sort of get to you, not knowing where these things are, and it's so very, very different to that physical and real threat.
Mate, look, it is, and I know personally it was one of those things, and I said this once to a journo where I was back in Australia years later, and mind was wandering, obviously, and I was looking on the side of the road for disturbed earth because you've done it for so long where you're looking for signs of, is that something? Did someone put an IED in there or a landmine or something? But it is, there's only so many things you can do to mitigate that risk. But you do it every day and it becomes just part of your life, right, when you're in country, right? So
Mate, you and the Bushmasters, I tell you what, I had this apparent nickname. Actually, what's your best nickname? What's your favourite nickname?
Just Dan.
Just Dan?
Yep.
Just Dan, the dashing Dan?
Just Dan.
The winner of the hill sprint at
Thank goodness. Yeah,
no. I had this bit of during Afghan 2012, I got this bit of a reputation for being called half on Hesto. I hated walking and I hated Bushmasters, only because by that time, this is 2012 in Afghanistan, every single time we stepped foot out of Tarin Khat, as you know, they knew we were coming.
Yeah, of course.
I mean, you were in charge of the Bushmasters in Iraq and again Afghanistan, and you sort of know.
See them watching you. Yeah.
Oh, but my head's overthinking, like we get a broken down tyre, they're tracking me the whole time, there's IEDs waiting for us. And it was just incredible to think about all that enduring risk that's going on over there, and exposing to yourself time and time again with these giant bloody bullet magnets, and you had to go out there and do that time and time again, mate. So I take my hat off to you. Jeez.
I don't know. Didn't look at it like that. I think that's why I was very suited to that sort of career, is because I didn't look at and didn't dwell on those aspects of it. I can recognize it. What can I change and affect in this space? Well, I could be observant and be part of the team and doing that.
Yeah,
that is all I can do. Park it.
Yeah, gotcha.
Yeah, that's how I looked at it.
Move on. Quite the realist here. You were afraid of the dark as a child?
Yeah, I know. But then I went underground, right? Mining underground. Weird.
Yeah, but you went underground with explosives.
Yeah, that's true.
I was afraid of Bigfoot as a kid, mate, and in the dark, absolutely. Yeah, people talk about this like addicted to danger, and are you addicted to danger, or you're sort of addicted to that true mortal test of your own skill sets?
You're not the danger side of it, not at all. I think it's the challenge aspect. The how am I going to deal with this situation? I think it's the unknown is what I wouldn't say addicted to it, but I certainly potentially. I mean, it's that rush of adrenaline, the highs, the lows, the peaks of that, and then nothing. And I certainly know for a fact during my service, by the end of Afghanistan, my last deployment, my profile for risk was probably not great.
Yep.
Whereby, I'd have mates go, I can see what you're doing, Dan, as in I was, deliberately exposing myself whilst walking along a ridge line. So they knew that I was there for someone to have a crack at me, stuff like that, right? My time, if I had continued down that path and stayed serving and continued doing trips, there would have been a point at my luck would have run out at some point.
Was that trying to provoke you to ROE or just trying to provoke? Yeah, absolutely. No, I'm with you, mate. Being there, not walking along ridge lines, just landing helicopters as close as I could.
So you know what I mean? Pushing that envelope a little bit too far, I think, whereby you're going, exposing yourselves unnecessarily for risk when you didn't really need to. It wasn't part of the mission to do that. So
probably felt very calculated in your head, though. You knew that they weren't accurate first round shots, so you're good to go.
I was hopeful, mate. Yeah.
Mate, I love one part in here you talk about, and this is again for people to try and draw relevance here. One of your deployments, you're back out through Dubai. The next thing you're in Los Angeles on Rodeo Drive. So my last partner was actually from LA, and I came back from 2 separate deployments straight back to LA and Rodeo Drive. And as far as one of the most separate and unique places to be, sitting there going, right, where have I just been? 24 hours ago I was with Julia Gillard overseas, and now I'm sitting here and people have...
It was so bizarre. I remember having cocktails in the pool in Vegas.
Yeah.
And it was it was probably only 2 days before we just dealt with an IED in Iraq that had killed a heap of civilians. Right, I literally drove past it and the vehicle's on fire. And then 2 days later, I'm sitting there having pina colada in the pool in Vegas. Mate, it was strange.
And that's particularly for people, there's a lot of conversations around the moment in the media about, multiple deployments and decompression periods and things like that. And I actually found one of the hardest things to sort of come to terms, not hardest to come, but one of the most surreal things to come to terms with was that just immediate transition back into civilian lifestyle. I remember my mum getting upset with me 48 hours after one Afghan trip, sitting on the back bench for not getting up and putting my dishes away. I'm like, my head still isn't even here.
Holding you accountable, I like it. Yeah.
It's very easy to also come back with this sort of mindset of like, these people don't even know like what's going on over there. This isn't the real world. That's not the real world. And then, having to come to terms with like, is deployment even the real world? It's like the real world for you while you're there, but then you have to get back and adjust to other people's real world. And a lot of people lose themselves in that and start to get this entitled and expectation. Like, you people need to educate yourself. And it's like, I actually like going back to what you're saying. I volunteered for service so that these people don't have to do that. So don't feel entitled that they should be thinking about you. I don't know. Tell me how you worked through that yourself?
That is absolutely my mentality. So I chose to sign up. I don't expect recognition from anyone in the Australian public. I think it's great that we have started to change, certainly since Vietnam. Goodness, it's, so much has been done since then.
Yep.
For veterans and the recognition, because it is tough what we do. It is hard. And I think we are fortunate where we are able to shape and change the landscape where we have the freedoms that we have here in Australia.
Absolutely.
It's probably,
we are such a lucky, if 2020 has taught us anything, we have our land girt by sea is key, if not decisive terrain in the strategic environment, isn't it?
But look, I chose to go, and you chose to go away, and we've been fortunate. It hasn't been on our shores, right, to go and deal with things before it gets here. And I firmly believe that we're dealing with some of these problems around the world. When I say problems, talking about terrorists and other things, dealing with them in their backyard rather than ours. And that's how I still look at it.
No good. And I want to jump on something you said in our last podcast, talking about people who come up to you and say, I haven't gone anywhere. Particularly at the moment, there's a lot of conversation about, DVA and defence has what a veteran is defined, serving a day, you're a veteran. And so many people in the veteran community putting themselves down. It's like, I didn't go anywhere, I didn't deploy, and signing up for that uncertainty and needing for people to actually just sort of connect and recognise, signing up to service, you've done your part, and it's important for you to feel included within our community and for other veterans to help and make them feel included in our community too. So next part in here, what are we talking about? Now, mate, the loss of Crash. I'm not going to take you back into this, but it's just so important for people to understand. Again, like I told you, I lost Scotty over there 2012, and we were then on the ground for another 3 days, and then you guys were still there in the AO and particularly pulling back, bombing up, recovering yourself personally after that immense exertion. And then a lot of people don't really understand the emotions then that go through, like in here when you've heard that Crash didn't make it. And a lot of people think, did you want to get back out there? Was it about revenge? And it's actually not. It's kind of more so about wanting to, finish what you started, serve them proud.
I think that's the best way of putting it, is finish what we started, right? And you're right. That's probably that day in particular, when we lost Crash in 2010, when he was shot and killed on the battlefield. That was a really tough day, not just for what had happened that day, but it was I remember the walk back from that battlefield, because we knew that he'd been killed. I'd seen enough unfortunate incidents over the years to know deep down that we probably weren't going to see him again, but there was that hope that we could get him back to further care, and who knows, something could have happened. But there was a sinking feeling as we started withdrawing from that fight that was not going to be the case. But I was so physically fatigued and emotionally drained, but then getting back, I think about vomited, all these other things that had happened because I pushed myself so hard. But it was knowing that we would have to go potentially do it again the next day. And then being in a position of, I was a corporal at that point in time, but getting everyone else motivated and then trying to inspire those around you once you've been through an incident like that to get back on task and get back on the job.
And how did you do that?
That's tough, right? I think for us it was, we had a debrief, we brought everyone in. We had that period of time to mourn and to get over it. And I think a sergeant at the time said, look, this is it. This is our time. We need to deal with whatever's going on right now, because we can't be dealing with it when we step outside the wire. So
absolutely.
Grip it up now, deal with it. But that's what you have to do. Is that the best approach? Probably not for everyone, because everyone's different, right? Everyone deals with things differently, trauma, events like that. Yeah, but for us, we had a bloody exceptional team, in fact. Very highly motivated individuals, very professional. But mate, it was really hard to try and motivate and inspire people to get back on task. Certainly at that point in time where we felt as if the government wasn't supporting us with what the task was. And for us, when I say the task was to clear the Taliban out of where they were at that point in time. But we weren't getting the resources as what we probably needed to get that task done. Yep. And then when we did, the handbrake sort of kept on getting pulled on when we started taking casualties. Yeah. We accepted those risks. We all accepted those risks by going over. We knew ultimately what would happen if we didn't do our jobs well or just through chance, right? Yep. We knew that. So it was very disappointing to not be able to do the job to the standard that we could have done it. I think it's probably the biggest letdown from that point in time in my life is going, well, we could have done this and could have done it bloody well. Yeah. You gave us the skills to be able to do this, but then you didn't let us do it.
Now that's a lot. That's a lot to work through. I mean, just for quick parallels, when I lost Scott, it was on day one of a 3-day clearance of the Kajaki fan in Afghan. And, again, we lost him to an IED, so it was even more frustrating. You couldn't, we were under fire for the next 3 hours, literally collecting Scott and taking him back. And then I sort of brought the platoon and we just did a good old-fashioned orders group around the map. We just did a good old orders group to refocus and realign ourselves. But we were able to then crack on the next 2 days and get the job done and achieve the mission. And, a lot of what we did then was in Scott's honour, and it really made us, if ever we ever needed purpose outside of ourselves, it was, exalted ever further. But for you guys to have to sort of hold back on that, I really want to understand how that impacted you personally and professionally.
Look, it did, because on one hand, it's a focal point to go, you know what, we need to do everything to the highest possible standard because of this reason. Yep. It is a focal point in that regard. But on the other hand, it was a disappointment when we weren't allowed to do that. Mate, it was very conflicting. Yep. Felt very conflicted at that point in time. Didn't even know how I should feel at that point in time. I do remember sitting there after one of the patrols going, well, what are we supposed to do next? Like, you talk about that purpose and the mission. Well, I thought it was defined, but then all of a sudden it's not defined. So what are we doing? And then you start having those questions, well, what are we doing here? And that's the worst mindset to get in when you're in a place like Afghanistan and in the shit. You don't want to be having those thoughts at that point in time.
Doubts in your strategic purpose.
Absolutely. Yeah. Right. But a step back from that, again, having that time and realizing, this is probably not a path we need to go down, and stepping back and go, well, let's work within the confines of what I have. Yeah. And it's not about me, it's about the team and everyone else as well, and getting on with the job and looking after everyone at the same time.
Solve the problems you can.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's solve the problems you can. And unfortunately, some of those problems, although so frustrating, were outside of our scope and ability to affect. Yeah.
I tell you what, there's some lessons learned in there, isn't there? As far as even in then your potential ability to empower others to, as a bare minimum, if you're assigning them the task, to fully understand what the strategy or purpose behind that task is, and enabling them to operate within that, and then allow them the flexibility to do so. Because appreciating
it's the allowing the flexibility part that's the key to that.
Well, absolutely. And understanding how you can actually have a huge negative impact on people if you don't follow through with that.
Absolutely.
And then interesting, mate, regardless of being able to go back out there and do what you wanted to do, you still continue to serve, continue to carry on the task over there and go on to many other achievements yourself. The part that Crash plays in your life today, as far as inspiration and accountability for yourself personally, given that he no longer has the ability to do that. For me, Scotty is a constant part where I think I'm in my darkest days, and I have a responsibility because he's no longer here to do what I can. I'm sure it's probably similar for you and Crash.
It's a good way of looking at it. Yeah, it is, mate. It is all of a sudden a whole, when you're doing something, and if you take a shortcut, it's a bit of a reminder and a bit of a slap in the face sometimes. Physically to me to go, or not physically, but metaphorically, where you go, well, this is probably not the approach, or this is what I shouldn't be doing because of those reasons, exactly what you just said. So it does hold you a bit more accountable, I think, sometimes as well.
Yeah, absolutely, mate. Then coming out of going from that, incredible climax that was Derapat, and then seeing that strategic handbrake, and then you're right in here, you have all the battlefield spectators come out. I'm sure that would have been absolutely fantastic, but you can sort of empathise with people that they would like to feel some form of connection to it. At the same time, you're probably lens me just like, excuse me. I love the way you articulate in here, and I don't want to give away too much of that. But what I want to jump into is actually then you talk about the rapid transition out of that and your inability to essentially to connect with that community, connect with that culture that could have potentially helped you decompress further from it. I'm really interested to understand how you sort of wound yourself down from that critical incident, that critical time through to your transition out of country and into your next step.
Yeah, look, I mean, it was a challenging time whereby, as you said, then the handbrake was pulled on. We had a mission to do, but then we weren't given the resources to do it. For us, I think we came together closer than ever we have before with our relationships, and I think just really getting to know each other by people's frustrations, and then how talking through them and dealing with that. So for us, I think it was managing expectations. And also, again, it comes back to that controlling what we could control. I remember leaving country and an IED had gone off the day that I was on a chopper to get out of there, and as it's gone off, it's killed a heap of women and kids. Mm-hmm. And that right there was like a slap in the face. Everything we'd just done the last 3 months in this area. What change have we actually affected? What have we done?
Yeah.
For this to still be happening? We haven't provided security to these people. We haven't helped them. Yeah. Like, how have we helped them? We've probably caused more problems than we've solved for them. So, I mean, I had a lot of questions unanswered, certainly when I left Afghan for the last time. And so it was a bit of a downer. We'd lost throughout that whole deployment, not just in MTF-1, but there was 10 soldiers of Special Forces as well in that 9 months period that we'd lost. And then for that to happen on the day that I'm leaving, going, well, what did I sort of achieve here?
Yeah, no, I'm with you. Mate, it was backtracking one step during my trip 2012. We lost Merv and Nate. And then 48 hours later, the 3RA guys lost 3 of their guys to Hekmatullah. And I watched that strategic handbrake get applied. And what happened was the call came down that no regular forces were allowed outside the wire. And then next thing, my platoon, because the other platoon was still dealing with Merv and Nate's loss, I was actually cut over to the SSR squadron, and together we worked for the next 3 weeks to track down Hekmatullah. I remember the poor 3RA guys, and I knew the OPSO and the CO and their inability to get out there to catch this guy. Like, we knew who this guy was. Their inability to get out there and prosecute that target, that they jaded an entire generation of infantry guys. And what's worse, mate, is they made me spend 3 weeks in a Bushmaster. They made me spend 3 weeks in a Bushmaster, but it was just so incredible to look back and just see the actual damage you do. While you may think you're saving lives by preventing physical risk, the mental and emotional risk you actually and trauma and injury you actually inflict in not trusting your people to do what they're trained to do is a consideration that's always rested with me. Be that out of the military now, or for those I speak to back in the military, is like, if you're going to ask people to do something, be ready to allow them to do it. Because the worst thing you can do is pull them back at the time whereby you're going to cause more damage than good.
Well, absolutely believe that the case. It is, for me. I've seen it. You've seen it as well, and I would say that the damage done by that, from a professional point of view, and the development of the future generation of soldiers, certainly seeing that action, it certainly does jade people, and certainly raises a lot of questions as to what their purpose.
Yeah.
By doing that. So look, anyway.
Undermining your purpose. Yeah, absolutely. What I do then love, mate, is then reading your classic transition back into the regular army, whereby I don't care how many operations you've gone on, Corporal. You need to go and become a substandard corporal. You need to walk 20 Ks. You need to go back to these old school tactics. One of the biggest things that I really did, and I will say this, hate within defence and also within outside of defence, is this is the way it's already been done. And this resistance to innovation, resistance to modernisation. And on the last podcast, we talked a lot about, holding those cards and holding on to things. And there's something to be said about maintaining a standard. But for me, the actual issue is not the standard. It's the mindset that is resistant to upgrading and improving that standard and making it more relevant. Talk to me about that and how the impacts on you coming back from doing your job for real to then being pushed into this round hole square peg situation.
Oh, mate, that fun times, fun and games at that point in time in my life. Look, it was, and even to this day where I'm now in defence industry, seeing, look, they're getting there. when I say they're getting there, the cogs are turning and things are changing, right? But it's never fast enough to what it needs to be. And look, if you move too fast, there's problems and challenges that come from that as well. But yeah, look, absolutely at that point in time in my career where I was forced to adhere to these standards that I've been doing it for 10 years, and I needed surgery on my legs. Actually, so there's a reason behind why I couldn't do it, because I'd pushed myself too hard in Afghan and
shin splints,
compartment syndrome. So they ended up opening me up when I got back. But again, it's doing the right thing by the Defence Force, where I chose to do the course whilst I was in pain. Go, well, that's what they need me to do, rather than get myself sorted and then go and do the course, because that's what they needed from me at that point in time. Again, it was that giving back or giving too much.
Is that potentially devaluing the individual by not just making you feel individually cared for, individually considered, potentially?
Yeah, but look, potentially. But getting back on track again, it was a very challenging time. I think it was the final, realization for me where I was just a number on the page at that point in time.
Yeah, gotcha.
And I'd lost my drive, because I still wanted to go to Special Forces, but unfortunately I couldn't. The reality of that happening was I think I've spoken about that with my injuries and stuff. It just wasn't going to happen. So for me, it was like, well, this is just another confirmation where I think it's time that I need to change.
Yeah, gotcha. Yeah. Sorry, mate. You went on a Special Operations Task Group deployment before me, 2010.
I think I had a hat made up that said taxi on it. So,
mate, you boys worked hard. I remember. So again, I took over 2010. I took over November platoon at the end of that year, which was the platoon that had the 3 guys that were killed that year during the Black Hawk crash. So I was instantly flooded by reports on how tough the Bushmaster guys had it, backing up from between working with FE Alpha, FE Bravo. And in here you talk about just that physical toll that took on you. Vehicle ops is not easy.
Yeah, the attack dog, marking his territory, trying to sleep during the day in the shade.
I love
couldn't
that.
Sleep under there, the bastard.
I love that.
But no, it was, mate. Look, I think I've lost 15, 20 kilos easily.
Yeah, mate, I love it. My first trip to Afghanistan was actually in 2011, where I took our Prime Minister Gillard over. I was her personal security officer when she did her first trip to Tarankot. So I actually love reading in this book when you talk about later at your medal investor ceremony, where you're actually quite impressed talking to her and hearing of how informed she was on the ground. Now, this is where I love where our little lines cross. I was, first time as a captain, as her personal security officer. Usually it's a soldier, but there was a security clearance piece to go into the meetings with her. So I sat there with her, mate, as she was there talking to the 4-star general in charge of Afghanistan and telling him what we needed from different layers of ISR through to support and CASEVAC mechanisms in order to maintain the Australian contingent's deployment and support to the coalition effort. And then got to spend many, many hours with her in the back of cars and the private conversations. And she was so open and engaging and asking so much information. So I got tickled pink reading that, because she went over there and really impressed me with her thirst for knowledge to understand what was actually going on at all levels, and her ability to then feedback and provide that perception to you, who's definitely had his fair share of actual experience. So
absolutely. And I think she could have, didn't come across well in the media, and after meeting her, I absolutely changed my perception of her.
Yeah, she did the same.
Absolutely.
When I got to sit there in the back of the car and talk to her, and she spoke to the soldiers, was it at Poppies?
Yes.
And there was no prepared statements, it was just her talking. I was like, man, that's leadership. We need to see more of it. And she said, Heston, you don't understand the party politics. And I was like, no, nor did I want to. But anyway, it was good to go. What else? Now, you said you got the compartment syndrome, and you got a bloody staph infection as well.
Yeah.
Mate, I snapped my bacillin in 2014 and I went back in a week later with staph infection, spent 4 weeks there in hospital. What did that do to you? Did you?
Well, man, I went to Fiji because my mate Marcus got married, right? So it was rough.
Yeah.
It was rough, mate. In the pool, I remember it. Yeah. Anyway, I got through it.
You survived. I'm trying not to give away all the juicy parts, mate, but I just want to give people more reasons to read it. You speak a lot about here about your role since receiving the Victoria Cross, and you go into such amazing detail talking about your decision to receive the Victoria Cross, being rekindled with your mates, and some of that being the first time. And I love that story, and you have to get the book to read it, to hear that one. But then talking about the opportunities that open up for you, and one of them in particular here was working with the War Memorial. Now, I went to the War Memorial 2003, the first year I went to ADFA. You were basically made to go to the War Memorial. And I didn't go back until just last year, and I just went back there on a whim with a friend who was his first time, and I found it so therapeutic. I found it so cathartic. I found it so humbling to actually go back there at the very start of my career, then at the very end with the perspective of, like yourself, you know, having served, sacrificed and lost friends, and just really understand as a veteran going through what veterans go through, how beneficial it can be to go back there. And I'm pretty sure that you would share the recommendation for any guy and girl who served to get back there regularly and to spend some time there.
Look, if the opportunity is presented to you, look, absolutely. It changed for me as well. Like you, I went there and I was 17, part of my, I think that's still what it is, part of the program. And then going back there years later, and the significance of those names in the wall, it changes. The meaning changes. It's a place, for me personally, a place of healing. I've seen so many veterans be there for the first time, whether they go up to the cloisters and look at the role of honour, or if they're in some of the more contemporary operations and seeing what is displayed there, and then being able to then share what they were doing personally with their family that's there with them, the positive effect that it has. So it is a place of healing. Absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely. And especially, I mean, there's a lot going on in our veteran community at the moment. And, you know, the more material, mate, people can pick up and read something like this and feel relatable. And, you know, you touch on everything from pre-service, during service, highest performance of service, and then even like your own personal struggles during service, after service, you know, being thrust into the spotlight.
The mixed bag, yeah.
Yeah, it's absolutely fantastic. And so much at the moment I see in the veteran community is people's that loss of purpose, loss of identity, and all this uncertainty. And, you know, thank you so much for putting this together. And there's just so many good reads in there, I mean, that are so relevant to here and to today. And it's a story that is told. I mean, when did you get out? Sorry, 2000.
Technically, I'm back in. I'm still a reservist.
Yeah, but sorry, full time.
Full time, end of 2011.
End of 2011. But you know, this has relevance like straight away as soon as I picked it up. And you're ongoing with your current service, and like I love it at the end. There's still plenty to be written here.
There is, mate. Who knows what I could come up with next?
But, writing this book. What was your favourite part about writing this book?
I think that again we keep on talking about purpose, but for me, the whole reason for doing it was, I mean, if you do read it, it's my upbringing and where I've been and what I've done and what I've accomplished. It's to let people know that you can change your stars. Essentially, is just because you've grown up a certain way or from a certain sort of socioeconomic group doesn't mean you have to stay there. Yep. That was the real reason that I started this project.
You can take control.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, absolutely.
And one key part reading about it, I mean, it's your story as a kid is so authentic. Your story in your career is very authentic, and then you start to see this potential inauthenticity creep injected by others when we start talking about. And it's a great tale in here talking about what was created, what was supported, what was instigated to help support. As we spoke in the last podcast about what the potential perception of a Victoria Cross recipient was, and then I feel as the reader and now talking to you that this book has potentially been a huge part of you feeling reconnected with your true authenticity. It's actually all out there for others to know, to hold you accountable to.
Yeah.
But to get the full picture, was there a level of feeling completed in publishing this, or is that just my outside perceptions?
No, not at all. Look, there was, and I think I've gone about it where I wouldn't say I lost my way. That didn't happen at all. But there was a feeling where I could have.
Yep.
And that I hoped that would come through the stories as well. So that was part of the, you know, that was a conscious part of me trying to put that in there where it painted that picture where, you know, just because of all these things have happened in your life, and that as a veteran, point of view of a veteran, that you can get back on track as well. And I think that's a part of that further education piece for me, and personal development piece for me was me getting back on track and realigning.
Absolutely. Ladies and gentlemen, Dan Keighran, VC, Courage Under Fire. As you just said in that last sentence, if you would like to, as a veteran, have a read of a truly exceptional but extremely, extremely relatable story, apart from winning a Victoria Cross, relatable story that goes through everything from service, promotion courses, administration, getting lost, through to pomp and ceremony, and be able to sit there and, like I did myself, try and draw traces of your own career in there to help make you feel more relatable as the person reading this, or just someone who wants to know more about what life of a veteran in service is, or someone who has a life story that can then look at the highs and lows of this. Have a read of it. And it's just so empowering reading others and being made to feel so much more relevant by reading other people's stories and actually feeling and understanding that like you're not alone in a lot of these things, mate. So really, really appreciate it.
Absolutely appreciate that, mate. Chatting with you as well. It's been great.
No, absolutely. Thanks, Dan.
Cheers, mate. Thank you.
Thanks for listening to the Voice of a Veteran podcast. We really hope that there were some key takeaways that might help you, be they relatable, be they aspirational, but we're not just here for your entertainment, so please make sure you remember, move on and action from here.
And that's it, guys. If you've heard something here today that has truly helped you, it's our duty to share that information with as many as we can. Support is about being proactive, and that's taking action to better our own lives as well as the lives as many mates as we can.
We love your support getting these messages out, so please subscribe, go to our YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, Voice of a Veteran. Catch you next time.
See ya.